Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber and thanks for joining us. I am here to bring you the latest update in the Doomsday cult mom murder trial that we've been following here on the network. And believe it or not, today is day 5 of the trial against the 49-year-old Idaho woman charged with conspiracy and first-degree murder. Now, the victims in this case are her own children, 7-year-old J.J. Vallow, 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. There is a third victim that includes her husband's first wife, 49-year-old Tammy Daybell. Now, Lori's current husband, Chad Daybell, her co-defendant, faces similar charges. He's going to be tried separately at a later date. But who better to bring us up to speed on what is happening inside that courtroom and what is happening in this trial than our very own Gigi McIvey, who has been inside that courtroom tweeting live updates for us every day. Welcome, Gigi. Great to have you here. Good morning. I want to start, you know where I'm going to start. The bombshell testimony of Melanie Gibb, Lori Vallow's, let me make this clear, former best friend. They're definitely not friends after the testimony that she's given yesterday, and we've already seen the interviews she's given in the past. Walk our viewers through who Melanie Gibb is and what her big takeaways were from her testimony yesterday.
Well, Melanie Gibb and Lori Vallow were best friends throughout this whole time period where everything unfolded from when she first met Chad all the way up to her arrest. And Melanie Gibb was kind of thrown under the bus by Lori because when the welfare check happened, Lori told police Melanie Gibb had J.J. in Arizona. Melanie Gibb thought that J.J. was with his grandparents in Louisiana. So she gets contacted by police. And yesterday just lays bare, essentially, that Lori lied to authorities about the location of J.J. back in November of 2019. So it was like high school, Jesse. It was like two best friends that had an argument. They see each other after a hot minute. Lori had her arms crossed when Melanie Gibb walked in, looked her up and down, watched her until she took the stand, and then at times would watch her testimony. At other times had her head down. Sometimes they locked eyes and quickly looked away. It was quite dramatic in there yesterday.
Talk to us about the audio recording that was played, right? There was an audio recording between Lori and Chad and Melanie, right? What did we hear from that?
On that audio recording, Melanie Gibb recorded this for police. So, of course, she's a little more polished than they are. But she calls them out, essentially, on lying to the cops, saying that she had J.J. Then they get into scripture warfare with each other, kind of a mudslinging, I know you are, but what am I? I'm better than you. You're a sinner, that kind of thing. You've been taken over by Satan. But in that phone call, Lori says some really key things I think is going to come back and bite her, which is, I know exactly where JJ is. He's safe and happy. And at one point, she even says her brother Alex, who is believed to have been the killer of the kids and helped bury the bodies, she says on that phone call, he has no clue where the kids are.
And Melanie also talked about the couple's extreme religious beliefs, right?
Oh, yeah. This jury, Jesse, I'm going to tell you, watching them as they tried to digest this massive amount of crazy that they were given in such a short amount of time, their faces told the story of what they were thinking. They were perplexed. They were shocked. They were just confused. And some people were just stoic, trying to comprehend what they were hearing about these extreme religious beliefs. It was so obvious to everybody in that room. This jury had wow moments. And then the other big wow moment for this jury yesterday was when they finally learned that Alex Cox, Lori's brother, was the one who killed Charles Vallow under the guise of self-defense. So they had quite a lot to take in yesterday, and what a big day for those jurors to get kind of thrown into the religious aspect, because up until this point, we really haven't gone there in testimony yet. And
let's be clear, this is a jury, surprisingly or not, really didn't know about all the details of this case. And we do. And so the fact that this jury is hearing this for the first time and the different connections between all the players, of course, according to you, they seem absolutely shocked and flabbergasted about this. What exactly do those religious beliefs, how do they tie to the kids specifically and Tammy specifically?
Well, because they're all part of this similar thinking of this, I call it a wackadoodle religion. It's not even a religion. It's a band of misfits that believe in some combination of movies, essentially. It's kind of this new religion piggybacked on Mormonism. And so, I'm sure some of this jury is LDS. This is a very large LDS population here in Boise. And you could tell that especially during we heard the audio of the patriarchal blessing that Chad Daybell gave Alex Cox just weeks before Alex Cox drops over dead.
This was a phone call between
some of these jurors.
This was a phone call between Chad and Alex that the jury heard.
Well, it's not a phone call. It was an audio file that was found on Lori Vallow's iCloud account, like a voice memo she had recorded and kept. So you see some people on this jury very offended by this because Melanie Gibb made clear before this audio was played, Chad didn't have the authority to give that blessing. So he's out blessing people without the authority, which is an insult to people who are mainstream LDS and follow the beliefs of the church as normal people do.
So I wouldn't be so far out to say that Melanie Gibb could be the star witness in this case, at least so far. The defense had an opportunity to cross-examine her. What points did they make on cross-examination?
The defense really hasn't attacked any of these witnesses so far, and I thought that they went a little light on Melanie Gibb yesterday. It was more of, hey, where was she when Tammy was killed? She was in Hawaii, that kind of thing. They did want to strike her testimony at one point because they made the argument that she had met with the prosecution team and they weren't made aware. They weren't given some documents, but essentially Lindsay Blake said we didn't argue we didn't talk about anything new. Had we talked about anything new, we would have turned that over. And then today there is a Detective Duncan on the stand who had a PowerPoint that the defense objected because it was only created the night before. So they reviewed that overnight. We should see it. That has the contents of Charles Vallow's phone. So I'm interested to see what comes with that too. A lot going on in this case all of a sudden for these jurors.
Yeah, and my understanding is the jury heard a lot more about the death of Charles Vallow yesterday. I do want to pinpoint something, though. I want to make this very clear for everybody. We've seen a lot this past week. We've heard a lot about the backstory. But what has been the strongest pieces of evidence so far in week one that we have seen tying Lori Vallow to the conspiracy to kill these kids and Tammy Daybell and the actual first-degree murder of these children? What has been the strongest evidence to actually support the prosecution's case?
I think the welfare check, with Lori lying to investigators saying, hey, he's with Melanie Gibb. That's a big deal. She is absolutely telling an untruth. It's not like, oh, hey, look, he's safe somewhere. We know at that point the kids were dead. I think that's very, very incriminating to Lori for these jurors to hear this and know that she flat out lied to police and then subsequently called Melanie Gibb to say, by the way, take some random pictures of kids and pretend like JJ's with you. That's a big deal.
And you mentioned, and we were talking about Charles Vallow, right? So Agent Duncan was talking about the death of Charles Vallow, which, by the way, Lori Vallow is going to face her own separate trial, her own separate charge out in Arizona for conspiracy to commit the murder of Charles Vallow. Has the prosecution yesterday been at least trying to show to the jury that she was involved in the death of Charles Vallow? Because, again, this jury's not tasked with deciding that. But based on what you heard yesterday from Duncan, does it seem that's what the prosecution is alluding to the jury?
It was actually more with Melanie Gibb because she talked about the different entities that took over Charles's body, and this all came from Lori. So I think really Melanie Gibb was the one who gave a lot of insight into her beliefs that Charles was possessed and needed to die, because she later reiterated that at one point Lori said that Charles, Tammy, J.J, and Tylee, all four had to die. And so I think that really more than Duncan so far, Detective Duncan, Melanie Gibb's given the most insight into Lori's participation into the murder of Charles. But Detective Duncan yesterday said murdered on the stand. I was surprised the defense didn't say something about that. They just let it go.
See, I'm still of the belief that the defense is trying to win this case without throwing Chad and Alex under the bus. Am I totally off with that?
I don't think you're off with that, and I thought the opposite going into this, because that's just how she's operated her whole life, is throwing people under the bus who she no longer needs. all of her ex-husbands pretty much, friends, family. So, yeah, I was surprised in openings they didn't say, hey, look, she was under a spell. You know, she had no clue where her kids were. They told her they were fine, to trust them. Nothing like that. It was just the openings were, you have to decide if she was part of the conspiracy or in furtherance of the conspiracy. That was essentially it. So, yeah, I think you're right, Jesse. I don't see anything right now pointing to her wanting to throw either one of them under the bus.
Yeah, in other words, I think what the defense is trying to suggest is, jury, hold the prosecution to their burden of proof. They've thrown out a lot of different theories, a lot of different charges. They don't even know what role Lori Vallow Daybell might have had. They're asking you to find that, and that is not beyond a reasonable doubt. Gigi McIvey, thank you. Great reporting as always. Good seeing you.
Thanks, Jesse.